So like we all know, today is about discussing why we should promote reading, why is reading important. And like Fred said, he's been following Stan. Stan is a great writer. I happen to have met Stan at an internet cafe in my hometown in the Volta region, so around Keta, many years ago when I was a teacher there. And yeah, we just connected. Yeah, we had, of course, reading and the literary stuff in common. So I got to know about his writing skills and about different discussions. So it's very gratifying that we have the opportunity now to collaborate on this event and for Stan to share what he does with the Global Lab community and also with the wider world through the power of the internet. So I'm looking forward to a very fascinating session today. Stan will be sharing with us why reading is important. So of course, during the course of his presentation, please feel free to put your questions in the chat that he can track, and then he will be able to answer your questions directly. I'm sure that Stan himself will tell us more about the approach that he wants to take to run this session. So over to you, Stan.
Okay, thank you, Gamali. Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Stan Duga. I'm based in Keta in the Volta region. I'm a teacher, freelance journalist, and writer, and a blogger as well. I've been blogging every day since the start of this year, and I'm yet to miss one day. I wanted to make a presentation on why we should promote reading, but we are in Ghana. We have a lot of light out at my place here, so I'm unable to put it in the form of a presentation, but I'm sure we can be able to go with this. So please, I would like to start my presentation, why we should promote reading. Thank you. Okay, so when I was very young, I think I was about 10 years old, I started borrowing books from the Anglican library, that's in the Volta region. And I remember the first book I read was Gorilla. That's the title of the book. It was about the gorilla animals in the forest and how they live. And since I read that book, I maintained my love for reading by going to the library every time after school. And I can remember that I read at least one book per day since I started borrowing from the library. And it reached a point, anytime I borrowed the books and I took them back to the library, the librarian there wasn't sure if I was reading the books or I was just watching pictures. And he usually asked me to tell him what the book was about. And I was doing that. So anytime I borrowed books from the library, I will read it and then I will tell him what the book was about or what the plot was on. And I believe that's why I started telling stories from, and that's why I had the awakening to write as well. And I also believe that if you are somebody who reads a lot, you will naturally become a writer, or you can't help but to write. So I have a couple of points I would like to go through. The first one is the origin of stories. And what I know about this is that human beings have told stories since the beginning of time. As soon as we started who will tell kids in order to explain something about nature. For instance, if you are in a house and you have children who would like to go out of the house to visit some places or maybe venture out into the forest in prehistoric times, they had their parents telling them stories about animals they've seen, animals they've heard in the bush, just to scare them into not going out alone. So for quite some ages now, for some time now, we've been telling stories, and these stories are common to all races or all parts of the world. For instance, when you come to Ghana, we have Anansi stories told in the Akan ethnic groups. And then we have what we call a clique in Ewe, or in the Volta region, people who speak Ewes. These are stories that are used to educate children. They are used to explain phenomenon in nature and a whole lot of things, just to instruct our kids, to help them to acquire specific knowledge. And what most people don't understand about stories and the importance of reading is that as soon as you start reading stories, or in the absence of books, as soon as you start hearing stories, you start developing your imagination. And that's very important. And the more books you read, the more stories you read, the more imaginative you become. And we have what we call abstract thinking. And researchers have shown that people who are imaginative are better able to think in the abstract. So it's even possible that if you have children at school, say in the junior secondary school level or at the senior high school level, who are very poor in mathematics and science, you can reverse that, or you can cure them of that by just getting them to be reading stories or listening to stories regularly. As soon as their imagination develops, they are able to think in the abstract, and they are able to interact with maths and science as subjects and get better at it. So stories are not just for art lovers or people who are interested in reading and writing. Stories are for everybody. Now, at a point in our evolution, we had the invention of the printing press, and that was what greatly supported literature. The invention of the printing press helped us to publish more books, get more people to read, and at a point in time in England, the authorities and government were concerned that their teenagers were reading books more than necessary. Everywhere you go, they had their children reading, young adults reading books, and they couldn't wait for new books to be released or published or serialized in British newspapers. So the invention of the printing press came at the right time, and it came to support reading, and almost everybody was reading. But a few centuries later, with the advent of technology, TV, radio, the internet, researchers are now noting that people's reading levels are falling down. So you don't get people being as crazy about reading as they used to be in the past. And what is happening, particularly in Ghana at the moment, is that we have families in Ghana, houses in Ghana, their parents are fairly educated up to junior secondary school level. They are working, they have money, they have TV in the house, and their kids are watching more TV than they are reading books. Now, there might not be anything wrong with watching TV, but for children who are growing up, who are in their formative years, and those are years in which children are very, very impressionistic. They just watch their parents, what their parents are doing, then they also do that. So if you are parents in the house and every time you come back from work, you always sit before the TV watching TV, your children are also likely to be doing that. And even if you tell them to not watch TV, to go and read their books, there will be some conflict, because while you are telling them to read books, you yourself are not reading books, you are watching TV. So if you want your children to read, then you should also display that, so that they just imitate you as they will probably do in anything else they do. So the problem we have with education in Ghana now is that our children are not reading enough. And when I say that our children are not reading enough, I'm referring to novels, stories, newspapers, anything else but textbook. Generally, Ghanaian students only read textbooks. Majority of Ghanaian students only read textbooks. They are not interested in any other type of book or writing. And that is a problem, because while textbooks will help you to pass exams, you need non-textbooks to make a success of your life. So the effect of students in Ghana not reading non-textbook is that it's possible for them to become very highly educated, that is get out of the secondary school system, get courses to read at the university level, but when they graduate and they start working, they lack certain skills like communication, personal finance management, and a whole lot of skills that you need to survive in our rapidly evolving world. So reading is very, very important. And if we are readers, we need to encourage the people around us to read as well. Our children, our family members, our relatives. If there is a friend you have who is coming to celebrate his or her birthday in the next few days, you can give the person any other gift you like, but let a book also be part of the gift you be giving the person, just so that we can promote reading in Ghana and make it as important as possible. The next item on my list is the lack of a reading culture in Ghana, and I've talked about that already, but I don't actually know why we don't support reading, but I think it has to do with our adoption of Western culture. The reason being that when you go to the US, for instance, recently a list released by PISA showed that Singapore is the best country in terms of educational development, and the USA is having falling standards in education in terms of younger children reading or patronizing the arts. And the problem is that the US is having a lot of households in which children watch more TVs than they read books. And that's something which is also happening in Ghana. When you get out of your community, where I am right now, if I was to get into a number of houses around here, almost all of them have TVs in their homes, and their children who are students at the basic level, secondary school level, watch more TV than they read books. And that's one of our problems. So even though we as a country, before the coming of the Europeans, we all the ethnic groups in Ghana had reading cultures or storytelling cultures. Even though we were not having books, we had storytellers. Every family had, every wife in the family, every elder in the family was a storyteller. They told stories to their kids, to instruct their kids, to tell them about their life experiences, and all these stories, or all this retelling of stories, contributed to their children growing up to become responsible members of their society, working and doing what they also can to help move society forward. But fast forward, the Europeans have come, they've left, and the stories we used to tell at the fireside are now in books, but we are not reading the books. Just imagine, 200 years ago, our parents our elders are telling stories at the fast in terms of us not reading enough. Okay, so here is why we should promote reading in Ghana. When I started reading at age 10 and was reading about one book per day, what happened was that I became very, very good in terms of reading my textbooks, understanding better, to the extent that I was able to learn on my own without the aid of teachers. When I was coming to write my BC, Basic School Education exam in 2006, I remember our teachers went on strike, and for a few months, I became the English, science, and so much that I was able to think in the abstract. I was imaginative, and any other thing I read, whether it was a textbook or not, I understood it very easily. So I think that the best solution to the decline in the standard of education and student performance in Ghana is that we should get our students, our children reading from the very basic level. That's the only way to solve our educational challenges in Ghana. It's very important. So we should all support reading or promote the art. Now, my final item is that I wrote a speech when I was going to launch my first book titled Vacancy for a Lover. It's a short story collection. I delivered a speech titled "Why Literary Revolutions Precede Political Revolutions." Now, when I say political revolution, I'm referring to a change in the politics or administration of a country for good, a change which will ensure social justice for everybody. The economy should get better, the educational system should get better, society itself should get better, hospitals and healthcare should improve. Before we can have political revolution in any country, not only Ghana, we need a literary revolution. France and Russia are perfect examples. Before the French Revolution, there was an increase in the patronization of literature. They had a group of writers who were writing prodigiously, and there were people reading pamphlets, reading books, people standing on street corners, delivering speech to the populace, and they were all listening and spreading these informations. That's what preceded the French Revolution. Every other revolution around the world, be it in Russia or China, was preceded by some awakening in the people in terms of them reading, accessing information, listening to speakers, and these are all parts of the arts or storytelling or reading. And before we can have change, not only political change, but social change in Ghana, we need to support and promote the arts. We need to promote reading. We need to ensure that our students read, our children read, we also read ourselves. Since the beginning of this year, 2021, how many books have you read? It's when you are old up to a certain age, maybe between 30, 40, and you are in school, you have work to do, you have a job to do every day, it's very, very difficult to read. You might not be able to read books, a single book at a sitting, but you can read in bits. So whether we are in school or working, or no matter how busy we are, we can still read. That's the reason why I even started blogging this year by writing very, very short blogs about 200, 300, 400 word pieces, publishing them on Facebook and WhatsApp. And I have had a lot of people reading to the extent that I now have a broadcast list of about 2,000 readers. So as long as we also be able to love of reading, because it can only be. So I believe that we should support the arts, we should promote reading, even as people who are in STEM. This is very important. I know surgeons who listen to classical music. Ghana was supposed on, and he writes poems. Green in literature or in creative writing, but he doesn't. He's just a surgeon. He's somebody who is into STEM, but he loves literature. So whether we are into STEM or not, literature still matters. Reading still matters, because all education hinges on language development, and language development is helped by reading, and storytelling is paramount to that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Stan. I'm sure many of the people here on the call will have some questions for you. Evelyn has already started with the questions. So, but before she comes forward to put a question to you, I posted a comment, which was that, can you please share a link to your blog or maybe to your books or any other information about your work that you want us to see? Feel free to put that information in the chat. Evelyn, can you please step forward to ask your question of Stan?
Yes, I hope you can hear me. I'm outside walking, so.
Yes.
I had two things that I wanted to say. The first one was the one thing I've noticed in Ghana, despite the decline, as well as the decline in reading, as Stan has said, is actually comprehending what we read seems to be a problem. And I wonder what we do about that. And I'm talking even as adult readers. I mean, I train teachers, and you'd be amazed at how much they miss because they don't read to comprehend. And I wonder what we do to try and encourage reading for comprehension. So they'll read a document and they'll kind of summarize or praise it for you, but they will miss key points because they've not actually read for understanding properly. What do we do about that, Stan? That's my first.
Hi.
Did you want me to go on to the second one as well, or?
My connection went off for a bit. Can you please just repeat the question for me?
Okay, I said as well as the lack of reading culture, I also find that even adults, competent readers, as you may call them, do not necessarily comprehend what they read.
Okay.
So they'll read, they might be able to kind of summarize for you, but actually they miss key facts because they've not taken their time to actually understand what they're reading. What do we do to encourage that comprehension aspect?
Right. I have also experienced that. I think it usually happens on social media. You see somebody post an article or a comment or make a post, and then people start commenting, and you realize that there are a lot of people who actually, they've read the post all right, but from their response to the post, you realize that they did not comprehend or understand the post or the writing. I think that is a result of the kind of education system we have in Ghana. Our education system does not, I don't think our education system prioritizes reading comprehension or English comprehension. We are mostly concerned with students being able to memorize facts and figures and then just reproduce it to pass exams. So I believe that the only way to counter that is to get people reading from young ages as soon as possible. And then English, the study of English should also be prioritized at the basic school level. We have that already. So maybe what we need to do again is to, I don't know if it's possible to make literature compulsory. I don't think that's possible, but it's just an idea or what I think can be done about it. Because if every student was to be able to read some assigned books, taking through English comprehension exercises as often as possible, I think they will have that competence in time and be able to understand things they read.
Okay. Evelyn,
thank
is
you.
your question answered? Yeah.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. I think that's another question from Felix. So Felix, the floor is yours. You'd have to unmute yourself first.
Yeah, so my question is that I'm a type who likes reading, but the issue is that I can well start, but how to continue and finish is my problem. Sometimes I find myself using social media to the extent that what I plan reading, like I can just be trying to multitask, probably trying to read at the same time using social media. So it's really my problem, but I'm a type that I'm actually interested in reading. So I actually want to know what I can do to improve on my
Okay. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think Felix is talking about him starting reading a book and not being able to finish it.
Yes.
Right. So I think what you can do about that is you can ask, or we can do a root cause analysis. What actually causes you to stop reading the book? Is it because it is not interesting enough? Is it because you are busy? Is it because you have something else you have to do that you think might be more interesting or entertaining than you reading the book? So if you are able to identify the cause of you not being able to read the book, then you can find a solution for it now. If it is because you are busy, then can you rather make time during the weekend to read at a go? And if you, will it also be possible that maybe you are not the type of person who can read at a sitting? Then if it is a book that is having about 20 chapters, can you just make a point or promise yourself that I'm going to read 2 chapters per day and no more? Then you stick to that routine. So whether you read in a single sitting or not, you still end up reading all of the book. And I think that can also work. And I think I saw a question or chat about social media also. That's very, very important. A lot of us don't read because of social media. Facebook is just too interesting to ignore. At every minute, every point in time, something interesting is going on Facebook. Somebody is talking about somebody. There's some political issue everybody is discussing. There's some scandal brewing somewhere. So we are rather in a time in which we have social media and everybody and everything else screaming for our attention. So you as the individual has to tell yourself that, okay, enough is enough. I have to take charge of my time. If I'm going to be on Facebook, it should be between this time. You can't be on Facebook every day. You have your phone with you. Then once in a while, you jump to Facebook to check posts, to comment, to respond to people. You have to monitor how you are using social media just to ensure that it does not interfere with you cultivating a reading habit. If social media is a problem, try and see if you can just put your data off. It will not affect you in any way. Just put your data off and then tell yourself that on Saturday from 4 o'clock to 6 p.m., I'm absolutely just going to concentrate on this book. If 2 hours is too much for you, then you can just make it 10 or 15 minutes per day. I have a friend who doesn't read any books, but since I started writing this blog on the 1st of January and I've been writing every day, he tells me that he reads my blog every day and that's enough books for him. So I think you can still read your books to the end.
Okay, so we have Nigel and Evelyn who are raring to enter the conversation. But before that, when you talked about social media, it just triggered my imagination. I know that, of course, the downsides of social media are there. That's why we are talking about carrying out activities that will lengthen the attention span. However, I'd like to ask what you think about social media as a medium of sharing literature or encouraging people to read.
Yeah, I think that's what I just talked about a friend who does not usually read books, but he's reading my blogs every day. And he always responds to the blogs, makes some comments, asks me questions. And from our communication, I've been monitoring him and I kind of think that he's communicating better, he's improving as a person. There are some things. He told me just yesterday that because of the blogs he has been reading, my blogs, he has become more observant about things going around him and things happening in the society. So even though social media can consume our attention a lot and take much of our time away from us, if we don't use it very well, we don't self-regulate its use, it also works as a medium to promote reading. So you get people who have never read any book in their life chancing on some article or some well-written blog online, and then they spend about 5, 10, 15 minutes reading. So I think despite the challenges that come with using social media, it's still very, very, very important in promoting reading.
Awesome. So I'll just go on to Nigel and after that, Evelyn, because they are keen to get onto the conversation.
Yeah, hello. I seem to have same problem with Felix, but then for me, I only read when necessary or when I'm looking for certain information. That is for me. So the question I wanted to ask was that, are there any strategies you would want to recommend for me to maintain or start developing interest in reading? but I think you've answered some of the questions from the question Felix asked, but I don't know if you still have more for me.
Okay, so if I get you right, you mean that you only read books that are maybe related to your field, the kind of work you are doing, or what you are interested in?
Exactly.
Okay, I think that's fine. For instance, if you are a doctor, I'm sure if there was some new research material published on heart surgery, you absolutely go and read that.
Yeah,
that's fine. But the problem with that is that our society is structured in such a way that having knowledge from some knowledge from all areas helps. So even though you might have a particular interest or a particular type of books that you can read, I would say that it will also help if you can develop an interest for other type of books or other type of materials as well. For instance, I have a friend who says that he never likes it anytime I write one of my blogs and it turns out to be something concerning politics. And I told him that that's fine. Maybe you don't like politics or the way we are doing politics in Ghana, but these issues affect you and your family and people you know. So if there is something going on concerning politics and I write about it, it might not be something you are interested in or love reading about, but just because you are part of a society that is trying to improve always, constantly, you should at least read just to have an idea of what is going on and maybe what you can also do just so that our politics can get better. So in having a particular type of books you are interested in, just some specific interest in terms of reading, there is nothing wrong with that. But in order not to limit yourself and not to be devoid of ideas and knowledge in other fields, you have to broaden your reading interest. I think that's necessary. And you can just do that by finding stuff that are interesting enough for you, even though they are not what you usually read.
Okay, I think Evelyn is up next, and I'd really like to hear from Angela and Eugene as well what they think about the subject of reading vis-a-vis what's happening in South Africa. So maybe Evelyn, do you have any follow-up point that you want to make first?
Sorry, I was talking away. I didn't realize I hadn't muted. My issue is exactly like Felix's and Nigel's, in the sense that my attention span has changed. I read Roots, Alex Ailey's Roots, in 3 days. It's 1,400 pages. When I was 15. Now, if I was to read Roots right now, it would probably take me 6 months, because my attention span has really changed. And that's partly to do with the distractions of social media, but also the fact that my phone is also my office, because I'm self-employed. And so obviously you need to check the phone for WhatsApp messages, emails, etc. And then you go for that purpose, but then you drift to something else. And so to try and regain my reading habits, my phone is usually now after 6 o'clock on vibrate. So it's not pinging, which is that noise that we all respond to. And that kind of gives me some time to perhaps think a bit and also do some reading. And a lot of my reading has now gone online. So I read articles more so than I read books. But I know I can do better, because obviously reading fiction and novels definitely are much more, for me, I find that much more creative. Yes, I'm growing because I'm reading stuff for information, but reading fiction definitely helps. And I think my confession really is the fact that I've become, tied to this rectangular object called a phone that kind of rules my life, and trying to separate out the vital stuff from the non-vital stuff is really quite challenging. So that's the challenge, really, currently.
Cool.
That's good. I actually like the bit about putting the phone on vibrate. I think I'll start practicing that as well. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Over to you, Angela and Eugene.
Good evening. Sorry, I joined a bit late. I was busy with a class and then I had a power outage. But I can't identify with a lot of the things that people are saying simply because I train teachers and I happen to be training language teachers. So reading it's part and parcel of what I do. And I actually teach how to teach reading. And therefore, reading kind of comes naturally to me. But what I do find is that even though I read a lot, and in the last 2 years, my appetite for reading has just been put on hold because I'm busy with a PhD project. But my students are not reading. And the only way to get them to read is if there is something, if there's some mystery in the text that I want them to discover, then they'll go read the text. But other than that, it's kind of hard to get people to read. And a love for reading needs to start at a very young age. I think if we miss getting kids hooked on books in primary school, then by the time they get to postgraduate level, or the time even they get to graduate level, it really is difficult to get them to read. And as a language practitioner, I know that the reading child is one that excels, not just in language, but in other areas of life, in other subjects. It just opens up the world for them, and it gives them possibilities that are not there for people who don't read. So yes, I feel for the people who battle to read. I know it is a struggle to put your phone down and pick up a book, but you can get the book on your phone. You can download books on your phone and you can read them. So you don't have to lug a heavy book around and be inconvenienced by carrying a book around. And what I tell my students is that if you don't read, it just means that you're losing out on an opportunity to discover another world. It might not be a world that you like, but it provides you with the language, it provides you with the skill of accessing another world. And if you don't do that, you are the poorer.
Awesome. I think that's a very sound advice, Eugene, and thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
That's great.
Okay, Angela.
Okay, so I should say good evening to my colleague Eugene, and I'm so happy that he's on here. Yeah, it's my first time here as well. So I think what is important is the connection and the understanding that there are so many common educational concerns and challenges that we all experience. And it's in these spaces of sharing that we can grow so much more. So in terms of, I'm in science education, and obviously promoting reading in science education, but more specifically literacies, because when we think about it, science, when you're reading the content in science, you're still reading a language, and it's a particular type of language. And when we start speaking about the grammar in science, etc., it's so important to get the students to read. But you'll be surprised how many students, and just listening to the comments that have come through, how many students will you give an instruction, a simple instruction, and you say, do part A of assignment, and these are the types of things you need to do. We have a WhatsApp group because obviously we're all teaching online and it's all virtual connections. But you'll be surprised on the WhatsApp group how many students will still ask the question about what are we supposed to do? And then somebody must tell them, oh, and then what must we do? You know, so quite clearly, the person who's asking all those questions has not read what they are supposed to be doing. And neither have they tried to understand. So when Evelyn was talking about people are just reading, but not reading for
Go, Angela.
High school learners that I encounter, they read, but they don't understand. And the problem, I think, is it shows up in the pearls, of course, but it's because the love for reading is not there. And so when they don't read out of their own, if they don't voluntarily pick up a book, they never develop the skill of critical literacy. They never develop their critical literacy so that they can read, not just read the lines, but they need to read between the lines, they need to read beyond the lines. And also, I think that in school, that is not promoted, or it is left up to the teacher to decide to what extent they're going to teach critical literacy. And unfortunately, when we're sitting with classroom sizes in excess of 40, then it becomes difficult for the teacher to build in that critical literacy and that critical reading. It somehow gets left behind. And even where it is done in the primary school, it doesn't continue beyond the first 5 years of schooling. After that, we somehow switch to just getting the content, but not looking at how that content is transmitted. So it has a knock-on effect into adulthood where the adults don't read. And if you as an adult don't read, you do not encourage your children to read because you don't see the value of reading. And it just makes life so much more difficult for the teacher in the classroom. And just to latch on to what Angela has said, she's got a son who's an avid reader. Even listening to somebody reading the text to you is good enough, because it exposes you to different ways of engaging with language, different ways of engaging with the text, or different ways of producing the text. And that in itself is a development which for some learners just isn't there. Some students never engage with the text. They wait for somebody to tell them what's going on in this book, and they don't read it for themselves, so that they don't appreciate the richness of language. And if you don't get to engage with text, and you don't get to appreciate how language is used, then reading for comprehension is not going to happen. Reading is just going to be, the teacher said I must read, and then I think there's one of the somebody who writes prolifically about reading and the pearls and reading comprehension. She says they just stand there and they bark at the text because it's just sound and there's no comprehension. That's my 2 cents worth.
Well, I have a question. I think
it's more than 2 cents.
Angela, do you want to make a response or just?
No, I'm just saying that Eugene is saying it's more than 2 cents. I mean, what he's saying is so valuable, and that Evelyn also was saying that as well too. That whole thing about comprehension and the appetite for reading. I think Stan spoke about that initially in his presentation. That look how he started in the library, and today, where are these libraries? Are they even functional? You know, and are they accessible to all the communities? But what is a library now? A lot of the children today, we spent lots and lots of hours in a library when we were younger. Today, there's too many distractions. Thank you.
Thank you. So yeah, I was just going to pass a comment on the idea of how do we stimulate people to read. And I was thinking that, you know, these days people form book clubs or reading clubs. And I was wondering whether anybody here is a member of such a club, and maybe if they can share on some activities that they undertake to get others to read. And I was also wondering whether making reading competitive, like maybe sort of like a league table for reading, to see how many people can read X books in a certain defined amount of time can actually motivate people to read more. So I was just wondering what your experiences are.
I think book clubs are brilliant because they're both social and good for reading. I'm not part of a book club, but I remember when my daughter was younger, and this is in London, in the summers when she was in primary school, probably upper primary, they used to have a reading competition, like you've just said, where they had to read 10 books in the summer holidays, so the 6 weeks. They had to read 10 books and write a summary of each of the books that they've read. And in fact, when she got to primary 6, they had to extend the story beyond the book they had read. So you read the book, and then you have to then say, where do you think the story goes beyond that? And at the end of that, they got a certificate and a badge, like a crest that they had. And it was quite, the children loved it. They loved, and it kept them occupied, let's be honest, because they got to read the book, they had to understand it, they had to summarize it, and they had to write beyond the book or predict where they thought the story was going. And I think something like that is exceptional. But as Angela said, the challenge currently is decent libraries with decent books. So going beyond kind of, you know, electronic, because not everybody has electronic devices that they can access. So it's become a bit more challenging to be able to read. That's the other thing that goes with it. So I don't know. I mean, even the idea of a book club, I find that a commitment too far for myself. And I'm a pretty good reader. So I don't know what everybody else thinks, what we can do to make reading more fun. Maybe we bring more writers in, make people write more, and maybe that will make them read more. I don't know.
I think the point about getting the kids to write stories, you know, beyond what they've read, really speaks to me. And I just remembered something about a group of us used to do in junior high school, which is like from year 9 in primary education onwards, where in our class we used to like write our own stories. So like a group of us, you know, we kind of came up with stories that we wrote, and then other people would do like bits of illustrations, and then we kind of exchange those stories and read them. I just remember this from your comment, and I think that's also a cool thing to encourage children to do. Do you have any thoughts or experiences on book clubs?
Can I say I don't belong to a book club. Yeah, as Evelyn says, that's too much of a commitment for me. I'll start a book and I'll get bored with it and I'll pick up another book. So I'm reading 4 books at the same time, but it's taking me a long time to do it because I don't get much time to read as well. But I think the idea that Evelyn shared just now was actually very, very good in terms of the young people. And I don't know if you want to say more about that, because I'm just listening to that and thinking that would be something fantastic for us to actually think about introducing for our young people? Do you want to just say that again, Evelyn? I missed some points.
Okay, so this was out of school though. This was during the summer
Yes.
holidays, and the summer
Okay.
holidays were usually 5 to 6 weeks. So it was a book challenge, is what they used to call it. It was our local library, and all the libraries in Abara used to run it. So the children had to read 10 books, or was it 10 books? 10 books in 6 weeks. They weren't big books, but they were pretty weighty. And for each one of the books, they had to write a 1-page summary of what they'd read. And as they got older, so when they got to like primary 6, which is 11 years old, they had to write for at least one of those books an additional chapter to the book they'd read. So they've read the book, they've gotten to the end, but they have to write, rather than the summary, they have to write where they think the story is going to go.
Okay.
And then when all of that was checked, they got a certificate and they got a reading badge. And it was quite a nice badge, like a proper medal that said reading star on it. And she was, I mean, an avid reader. When she was younger, I read a lot. And I think, that habit came from, she got that reading habit. Interestingly, she hates reading now. So there you go. But loved reading. She would go through books really, really fast. And so that idea seemed to really work for her, that extra challenge of writing stories, like Gameli said, because it was beyond the story she'd read, So she'd read it and then she was going to continue that story. And I find children engage better, even at primary level, with that type of thing, getting them to predict, we've read this page, what do you think happens next? And that's where the comprehension comes in.
So I'm also...
But as adults, we lose that.
Yeah, but I'm also thinking if you've got debating clubs, and for the children to prepare for the debating clubs, then that's also another way of getting them to be reading as well.
True. Very true. But we're talking about children. The issue is all across all ages, isn't it? Children and adults.
Yes.
The children are easy to deal with. The adults are the issue. I teach adults as well. So I know the pain of trying to get adults to read. It's amazing.
I have many excuses.
Yes.
The idea of book clubs is wonderful. I no longer belong to a book club, but I still occasionally have contact with a book club because I do a guest analysis of a text for them every now and again. And the people in the book club are all older, mostly retired people. And it's just amazing how much those people can talk about any topic, talk about a book, which I don't find in our youngsters. And yes, Evelyn, if we have that kind of incentive for our younger readers, that they should read something and get some kind of reward for it, it may encourage reading. It may encourage book clubs actually taking off within communities where they don't have libraries, or where libraries are really poorly serviced and poorly resourced. But I think it can work, although the commitment that you need from the youngsters, I just feel that our youngsters these days, very few of them can actually commit to something. They have attention spans that jump every 2 weeks to a different hobby, a different activity. And I don't know, maybe that is why they don't read.
Well, thank you very much, Eugene and Angela and Evelyn, for your contributions to the discussion around book clubs. Fred says he wants to leave. Fred, you have to wait for the group photo. I'd like to ask Stan, a final question, just one final question, and also you can tie your closing comments to it. And my final question has to do with the fact that you said that reading is very important in starting political revolutions. I don't want to talk about political revolutions at this very moment, but cultural revolutions. And a lot of what we've said is about improving people's ability to read in English and improve on English language, etc. So I wanted to ask roughly two questions. One is that how can we encourage reading and writing in our own local languages? Because we are talking, there's a lot of discussion around decolonizing education. And then as a follow-up to that also, I'm interested in the fact that, do you think that digital technologies and tools can actually bring back the storytelling culture that we've been talking about? And is it possible to maybe focus on video and audio as a way of transmitting this storytelling culture and create a new way of learning, and maybe not necessarily focus too much on the on books or physical books as so to speak?
I haven't really given this a lot of thought, but when you're saying we could use the technology, and I think this would be a good way of getting younger, especially the younger generation, to tell stories, because they're doing it anyway on things such as TikTok and WhatsApp, where they are sending short messages, short videos, where they creating stories. So maybe we just need to give them an incentive to create a story that is not just based surely on or solely on the humor effect, or on having fun or poking fun at some person or some incident, but where the story being told needs to convey a particular value, where you need to tell a story that promotes kindness, or a story that promotes justice, or a story that promotes whatever. And I think it could be a starting point. It's an interesting idea.
Thank you. Stan, do you have any final thoughts or comments? Hello, Stan. Oh, it looks like we've lost Stan. Yes, Eugene, thanks for that. I think that's a very nice idea. So if somebody is thinking of a project or an initiative to encourage reading or literary culture among young people especially, but among everybody, they could take this up and, initiating a project to digitize stories. And actually, this reminds me of a project that a friend of mine started. She's called Kirsty, called the Nana Project. Basically, she interviews people of the older generation about some aspects of culture or some aspects of the history of Ghana. And so they share their experiences. It's a way of bridging the cultural gap. So I think that's a really cool project that I just want to use the opportunity to talk about. And I think that people can start similar projects, on different subjects or different thematics. Actually, you can start a project to record old African stories, for example, so that we don't lose them in another medium apart from the written word. Stan, are you back? Oh, it's rather unfortunate. The challenge with the technology is keeping us from having our speaker. But yeah, it's already 7 o'clock and we've come to the end of today's session. I'd like to say a big thank you to all of you for joining us. Maybe I can, yeah, I would like to say a big thank you for joining us. So next month, we will have another session. This time it will be on data analytics. We have a lot of members who are interested in building their skill set in different STEM topics. So next week we'll have an introduction to, next month we will have an introduction to data analytics. And then in December, there will be a science cafe talking about the contribution of research and development to Ghana's economic development. So what's the role of R&D? So I hope that you can join one or two, or both sessions going forward. Stan has joined us back. Stan, are you able to talk, and do you want to give us your closing words?
Right. So I was just listening to the last speaker. I think that's Eugene. I would just like to add that I have a lot of young guys in my area, for instance, and I think this is common in all parts of Ghana, especially the cities. You get guys talking about their favorite football stars. They make arguments about who is better, whether Messi or Ciro, and you could have a situation whereby one person is dominating the discussion and the rest will be listening very attentively to the person. So I think even if our children or the youth are not reading enough, maybe we can explore other ways of getting them to listen to stories. Just like how you say that we should digitize stories, we can make audio recordings of stories. If the person cannot read, then they can at least listen to that. And then you also talked about taking our old African tales and then creating videos of maybe somebody telling these stories, or maybe an animation series based on the stories. And you might just get a lot of young people who've been interested in consuming stories because of them being presented in such a medium rather than just a written word. So I think that can also help.